Okay, so you join me here for the first race of the three-part finals series of the 2023-24 ZRL season. For those who maybe are unsure, the finals are split over three races over the next 3 weeks. So we're in early April, and this week is the scratch race on Scotland's rolling Highlands loop. Next week there'll be a TTT, and then on the final week there'll be the points race. So I'm here again on my Wahoo Call team, and we were hoping to try and put in a really good result. How they split you into the divisions here is we're in a slightly different division from what we'd normally be in against some different teams. Some of the teams are the same that we've come up against in the normal ZRL season, but there are some other teams here. So I'm not fully sure how they split it up. I think it's a little bit of witchcraft from WTRL and how they actually construct the leagues. But basically, you have something called a plate, a cap, a bowl, and there might be a couple of others, a shield trophy. And teams are grouped by their respective finishing positions during the normal ZRL season. So for us in Wahoo Call, this Wahoo Call Bad Boys team, we regularly finished towards the top of our divisions. We never won a season. We won some of the individual rounds, but we never actually won a whole block of the 6-race season. But we were always in the top 2 or 3. So we are grouped with teams that also finished kind of at the top of their divisions. So there's quite a good level here in this field. There's these are quite accomplished teams. They've done well throughout the previous CRL season, and that's kind of how they group everyone going forward into these finals. So what we're going to do, it's quite a long race. I mean, it's 32k, so we're not going to go through the whole thing. So I'm just going to scan through to some key points in this race and just discuss how they play. Okay, so after you head out to the pens on this route, the road does go slightly downhill. So there's about 4k here where the road, generally speaking, trends downhill. There was one rider who did hit out, but it stayed at a nice low pace, nice easy pace. The group stayed completely compacted. Just a really nice little introduction to the race here. But just coming up the road was our first, potentially first side-in feature. So it's the first of the 4 climbs up the Breakaway Break KOM. Now I use the word climbs sort of quite loosely. I mean, it is a KOM in the sense that it's marked at the base and at the top. There's a KOM jersey and everything, and a leaderboard and everything else that goes along with it. But it's not that long, it's 600 metres long, and it's only got a few shorter kicks. Now, what you'll often find is this won't be decisive, as in riders not going to get away, but some riders may be dropped. So it was just important. All I wanted to do, I didn't want to be on the front of the group. I used my feather just over that slightly steeper section there, but I just kept myself buried within the guts of that pack, never touched the wind, just getting the maximum draft, but also making sure that I just didn't get tailed off slightly and then need to burn any matches to actually get back on. So it works out during sort of standard racing when no one's attacking. I think there we are, as a 54-second effort up there. Pushed the heart rate up to 192, so it was a little bit of an effort there, but nothing crazy. But I just made sure that I stayed in the draft. You can see up in the mini-map how the group was stretched out. So what I didn't want to do was go too easy, be towards the back of that. I personally would always rather be sat slightly further to the front, but staying in the draft, just conserve as much energy as I could, and just retain a good position in this pack. The road does go slightly downhill here now, so it was a case of being able to back off and just get as much recovery in the legs as possible. I did have a very defined plan of how I wanted to play out the final here. You can't always have. It's good to have a bit of a plan, I think. I mean, it was something we discussed as a team over Discord before we started. It's good to have a bit of a plan, but you do also need to be able to be a little bit sort of responsive to what might happen during the race. So my plan was to do the minimum work I could during this race, and then at the bottom of that KOM on the final lap, go all out basically from bottom to top. It's something that I've used, a tactic that I've used quite well in the past on this route. Instead of waiting for the last couple of 100 metres and going at it with a more traditional sort of sprint finish type mentality, personally I've found by going long, so you're looking at maybe anywhere between a sort of 35 and perhaps 45 second effort to kind of go bottom to top on that final climb. I've personally found that on this route, and routes similar, they have a very similar finish, maybe something up Libby Hill or a finish into the volcano, I've personally found that my results are better by kind of taking a lot of the variables out of it. I think these types of slightly more technical finishes, they're quite hard to judge when you want to actually start a sprint, and if people go a little bit long, you think, shall I follow them? Shall I hold on for another few seconds? And it becomes quite difficult to actually time. So by going really early, you're kind of just taking the variables out of it. Go as hard as you can to the finish line. And, you know, in the past, I've made it work. I've also got caught. With 50, 100 metres and just been swamped because it's a long effort and you sort of die towards the end of it. But that type of effort does suit me a little bit better. I've got a reasonably good sprint, but nothing that could ever be considered to be sort of a sprinter sprint then, you know? Like I can't hit your 1500 watts plus peaks, but I don't tend to drop off a cliff quite as much. So that kind of 30 to 40 second effort is something that does suit me a little bit better. It's not a total all-out sprint. I mean, it's an all-out effort for the duration, but you don't hit out with a max sprint like you would, say, during a 10 to 15 second sprint. You almost like pace the sprint, perhaps over 30 to 40 seconds, and that does tend to suit me a little bit better, just sort of physiologically. I'm stronger over that type of time span than I am over, say, 10 or 15 seconds. So that was my plan, and it was just a case of sitting in. We did have a little bit of an attack there. A couple of riders went off. You can see in the mini-map, it's come back together, but it has really stretched and split that group up a little bit. Now, I never went to the front, but what I did was I made sure I followed things. Basically, there's kind of a bit of a saying, isn't there, in cycling, that you hear riders say, I mean, I read it in Geraint Thomas's autobiography. He said that at the start of a race, or you can even say at the start of a whole tour in his case, you've got, say, 100 bullets to fire, and you need to pick when you want to use those. So using that same analogy during this race, I might have been able to have done a little bit less power by sitting further back in this pack. However, I was happy to kind of shoot a few of those bullets there just to make sure that I was the right side of any split. What I was sort of conscious of, I thought I'd be able to get back on. I wasn't overly concerned I'd be split and out the back. But what I didn't want to happen is I didn't want to kind of find there were gaps opening in front of me because I was trying to take it too easy, and then actually needing to go across. And instead of burning firing 2 or 3 of those bullets that I might have taken, for me to just kind of follow the move, I might need to fire 5 or 6 by actually trying to close back across. So for me personally, I thought it was some energy that I was kind of happy to spend just to know that I was safely in what is now the lead pack, slightly reduced lead pack. Still a pretty big group, but it has been slightly reduced. Okay, so we've dropped forward to, we've just finished the first lap. So it went predictably peaked, the power went up a little bit, up that corkscrew climb through the castle. We eased off on the slight descent, and then we took that breakaway bray in a very similar fashion to how we took it on the lead-in. Tried recovering down the descent, and we're on this sort of slightly rolling downhill section. And as you can see, one rider has gone off the front there. We talked about it on Discord. We weren't overly concerned. A solo rider with 17 kilometres remaining of the race was always going to have real difficulty kind of making that stick and staying away. But he has just broken off. And that first lap, it was taken at it wasn't a crazy high pace, but the power was on. It was at a high sort of average tempo, and it didn't really back off. It wasn't what you sometimes get in races, is there's these times of really high power and then times where it all backs off. But what we actually had in the first lap there was a situation where it was a little bit more constantly on, but without the crazy high or the crazy low. So there were a lot of riders here who were hurting. You know, my heart rate in that first lap was regularly up over 180. It's come down a little bit here. I've managed to kind of back off, or the entire group has backed off. So we talked about it. We thought, actually, even though it was difficult for this guy to get away, or will be difficult for him to stay away, this was quite a good time for somebody to attack, despite the distance that was left, because the whole group, there wasn't a great deal of desire to actually kind of chase it. And very quickly, this solo rider got a distance out to 15 seconds. And I have to say, personally, when it got to that time, to that time then, to 15 seconds, I thought he's got a strong possibility of staying away here, because there wasn't a desire to actually kind of chase it from the riders in the back. So he jumped forward another few minutes, and this route, it's got those two sort of steeper climbs, the corkscrew and the breakaway bray, downhill, and this rolling section. Now, like I said, that rider out front got 15 seconds, but here, the group did want to chase. So I'm just doing what I talked about in the first lap. I am increasing the power, I am firing a couple of those bullets to follow the riders who are chasing, but I don't want to contribute to this. I'm also conscious, like I said earlier, I don't want to be towards the back of the pack, because there's that risk that you might get tailed off or have to close gaps, which I don't want to do. My tactic or my hope and the way that I'm most likely to be able to win this race isn't going to be going in a breakaway. It's going to be waiting for that long sprint. But I do want to follow riders. So again, I do come through slightly, but that's just a bit of roll through speed. I mean, my power is very, very low there. I never come through to the front of this group. Just follow the guys who go. So that way you're staying in the draft and saving a bit of energy. But very quickly, as we go on to this sort of slightly draggy, climby section, that gap is tumbling very quickly to the guy who broke away. So it was a really good effort, but by the time we get to the top of this section, we have pulled him back, and it is, as they say in sort of a commentary, it is gruppo compacto when he comes back. But it did tail off a couple of more riders. So our sort of front group here, there are a few less riders, and as you can see, there are a couple just getting tailed off there in the mini-map. So we brought that rider back. The remainder of the lap took on quite a familiar pattern. But, like I say, that tempo really didn't drop off. We were discussing in Discord, I was discussing with a few of my teammates. They were trying to say to me that perhaps I should do even less work on this lap and sit right at the back of this group and literally save as much power that I can for the sprint. However, a few guys started going, and I got a little bit nervous here. I was sitting right on the back of the pack, but you can see how strung out that is. And I could feel myself getting a little bit twitchy sitting this far back. It had been quite a hard race. There's quite a few splits up the road there ahead of me. It had been quite a hard race. a lot of riders must have been blowing, because it stayed at a really high tempo. Again, like I say, without going crazy high or crazy low, the tempo stayed really, really consistent. And I got a bit nervous sitting that far back in the pack, and I wanted basically to be a little bit higher up. So I was trying to do as little as I could and stay on the back and hope that it came together. But I did actually decide at this point to spend a little bit more energy just to get myself forward, because I wanted to know that I was going to be the right side of any splits. I think, like I say, it had been quite a tough race, the generally high power, and I was concerned that group might split there. As it happened, it didn't. It split a little bit later on, and actually split kind of just as we went on to the descent down to the corkscrew. But just spent a bit of energy, so I have fired a few more of those sort of metaphorical bullets. But I am here at the front, and just staying in the draft. Just trying to save as much energy as I could now, and hoping that nobody put in any real long flyers before I could use that kind of tactic that I wanted to do, which was to hit it long from bottom to top of that KOM climb. So that power really stayed on for a few K. It's tailed off a few riders, as you can see in the mini-map. And now we're on this slight descent down towards the base of that corkscrew. I've got a feather power up, which was picked up at the banner just back down the road. And I do something here where I try and let myself drop to the back, or towards the back of the pack, and then give it a little bit of a kick while still on the flat, just to come through those riders to make sure I've got that travel speed moving forward and not getting stuck in any of the sticky draft of others. So I am second rider on the road going up here. It's this short, steep climb. It only lasts for maybe 10 to 15 seconds, but you could get tailed off. Again, I was conscious. I did stay quite far forward in this pack, because I didn't want to be closing anything in this final kilometre and a half. I backed off as quickly as I could here, just as we hit the top of it. I did back off and let a few riders come through. Heart rate's up in the high 180s, which is, I'm pushing it. You know what I mean? For my heart rate up to be that high, I haven't exactly gone easy. There's a slight descent here where I just try and switch my legs out and get as much recovery as I can, because we're looking at, in about 500 metres time, executing that plan of a really long effort from bottom to top. So what I try and do is come towards the back of this pack, because I want to try and use that pack to help the draft of the pack, to help slingshot me off the front when I come to actually making the effort. So what I'm doing here is just trying to go really easy. I'm getting that heart rate down. My heart rate is dropping. It's coming down, it's down to low 170s, into the 160s here, which is nice and low for me for a race. I mean, it sounds crazy, but for some people that would be really high. For me, that's actually quite low, mid 160s. Just kind of trying to drop towards the back of this pack. A little bit of roll through speed brings me forward. And as we come onto the base of this climb, what I look to do is stay seated in the saddle, but actually just raise my power, but without going orange, and then bang, hit it. As I get to the front of the group, I hit my power up and go. It's not all in like I talked about earlier. It's like a paced sprint. So I haven't gone off at full sprint power. I've just kind of gone off at maybe 90%, let's say, and just try and pace that effort. There was actually 8 seconds when my numbers went orange on the right-hand side. There was 8 seconds until anyone responded, and that was enough to give me a good gap. I got a 4-second gap, but here I'm really dying. And I looked at the rider list and I could see it coming down 2 and then 1 second, and I was concerned I was going to get caught. But I didn't. I managed to stay away. There was a second, or 1.34 seconds to a guy, Harrison Clark, who finished second, and then my teammate, Hugh Davis, finished in third there. So I managed to make that effort stick. It was a new best 30 second for me. I managed to do, I think it was about 980 watts for the final 30 seconds, which was a new PB. That was 12.3 watts per kilo, I believe. So it was a good effort. It was something I was proud of, and I managed to actually plan that tactic. I thought I might have got rolled at the end there, but actually planned that tactic and got it to work, which was 946 I think it was there for 30 seconds, and got that to work. So it was something I was really happy about. It helped us towards a second place for the team on the day, and basically on to TT